My epic ginger series has gone on for 512 days. Things look a lot healthier now. The foliage is much more of a dark green because I reduced the intensity of the bulbs to just 500 lumen 7.5 watt LED bulbs, and they give off a high proportion of blue light. That's why I think my plants do so well with such a low intensity of light. I'm going to do some touching up here. New shoots have bursted out in all sorts of places. I'm going to get rid of these chunks of diatomaceous earth that have hardened and clumped together that they've pushed out of the way. And I've added in a lot of sand over the last few weeks, so the top isn't lacking for sand at all. I'll be able to brush it and get everything looking smooth and aesthetic. But that's a dead shoot up there. That was the largest one. This is an example of a place where ginger rhizome has come up to the top. This is pretty normal for ginger. I don't know that the tops are supposed to be really pink like this. Maybe that's just what fresh, vibrant ginger looks like versus the older stuff you see in the supermarkets that's been harvested for a while and it's brown instead of pink, because this one came from rhizomes that look brown and just like your regular brown and yellow rhizomes in the supermarkets. So there's another shoot coming out. I'm trying to get flowers. I don't know if it's going to happen with this state of fertilization. I'll address this at the end of the video. For now, I'm just going to level everything off with sand and use my brush later on and get rid of this debris and dust off the leaves, etc. Trim off the burned edges. Back when there was a lot more light intensity from my LED bulbs with much stronger bulbs, the problem is the leaves that were close to the bulbs would get burned or be sort of a sickly yellow-green. I had the same problem recently with my Charente melons, so those are doing much better now that I've reduced the bulb intensity and spread out the lights. I'm using fewer now on a tabletop, so check out that series if you're interested. Growth is starting to get explosive. For ginger, growth is never truly explosive, even when things are doing really well like right now. It takes a few weeks for a few new shoots to pop out, and as you well know, if you follow this series in detail, whenever you have a problem, it takes so long to correct a problem that another 2 or 3 months flies by if you even solve the problem at all. So it just takes a lot of trial and error, especially since I've moved these indoors. But beneath here, this layer of sand, I have diatomaceous earth, sphagnum peat moss, and sand. So it's not the most nutritious mix because there's a lot of sand, but we've managed to get a fair bit of rhizome formation here. So I'm just going to smooth everything over. That pinkish rhizome top looks pretty attractive, but I just want to get everything to look like it is at a very well manicured beach, and I'll trim away the dead stalk and get rid of all these big chunks of debris. Here's an example of a burnt leaf tip. Now, I used to attribute this solely to the low humidity in San Diego, 45 to 35%, but occasionally it gets lower all the way down to 0 if there's a special weather event like the Santa Ana winds where wildfires are striking all over the place. But I think just having really powerful LED bulbs with smaller radius clamp lamps contributed to some of these burn spots. This is a good example of a spot that was directly in the path of 1080 lumen bulb for a long time. So those are my old clamp lamps. I just took them off, and here's my new setup with 10.5 inch clamp lamps instead of those two 8.5 ones. It'll help spread the light over a larger area. The bulbs are the same, and this helps to illuminate some of the shoots that were being ignored by the light, but they still seem to do pretty well. I mean, this one has a few burn spots, and leaves are curly because it's one of those unhealthy ones that came out after a very long period of dormancy. But all the new stuff looks really green and healthy, and they're not as wrinkled for the most part. They're pretty straight and look the way they should be. Here's a bird's eye view of my ginger plants after I touched everything up and removed the dead stalk. So everything looks green and verdant from distance. I got rid of the defects. The new foliage is coming out looking a lot healthier. It's not having that problem where the leaves are all curled and new leaves have trouble getting out of the yolk of the old leaves that are just too curled up. So hopefully with the change in conditions I can make this stuff grow near flawlessly. And to my next step, it's going to be about fertilization. So fertilization is very important because I have roughly half sand in there, mixed with diatomaceous earth. It's just not nutritious enough for most plants. I mean, it is to maybe eventually reach a reproductive cycle, but it would take forever. Now, I know a lot of you have qualms about using things like this, especially for a plant where you're going to eat the rhizome. But yeah, basically fertilizer, chemical fertilizer, gives the trace elements and the main compounds, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, in usable forms that plants need to grow. And this one is high in phosphorus compared to the usual more nitrogen-rich fertilizers, which help with foliage growth more. So I'm just going to take a scoop of this and have it dissolved in some clean distilled water and just pour it in. And then I'm going to rinse the bottle out. I get the impression that a lot of people are terribly afraid of using chemical fertilizers. It's actually what most of the agriculture in the last century was based upon. And just because you have the roots being bathed in these raw inorganic compounds doesn't mean that's what ends up inside the cytoplasm of the cells. The root system absorbs these compounds and uses them to synthesize everything the plant cells need to grow and reproduce and make the plant bigger. So yeah, just because you're pouring in Miracle-Gro doesn't mean I'll be eating Miracle-Gro when I make a soup later on with this ginger, like 6 months down the road. Likewise, if you grow plants in feces or rotting corpses, it doesn't mean you're eating feces and rotting corpses later on.